I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. Today on the podcast, we have the amazing Tricia Lewis. In November of 2016, Tricia decided that balancing a life of being an entrepreneur and a high-functioning alcoholic was too much to handle. She quit drinking and learned how to recover as hard as she drank without looking back. Tricia produces and hosts a weekly podcast called Recovery Happy Hour, where listeners can celebrate life beyond the bottle. Weekly guests from all over the world dissect all forms of recovery from alcohol use and the idea that an alcohol-free life is not only worth living, but more fun than you'd imagine. Recovery Happy Hour has been downloaded over 1 million times in over 100 different countries. And I'm thrilled to have Tricia here. I was on her podcast, episode 94. And Tricia, first of all, I just want to say, I feel like you're a sister of mine. I listen to you all the times and I agree with so many of things that you say. So I feel like we're connected. And I love the work that you do because us sharing these stories and having a platform for them is just so important. So thank you for that. And I welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I loved our episode. We had such a good time.
We did. And it's just, when I was thinking about it, there was a time when, I was listening to you talk about something recently about shame and guilt. And I was like, there's a time where I didn't even want to tell my best friends, let alone like spill the beans to the whole world. So there is something very healing about it. And then every episode I listen to, I'm like, oh yeah, like even if the story is completely different, I get it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, we all share that one big thing in common. It's the great equalizer in our community,
It really is. So I'd love to start with your journey. And it's in the introduction that you were high functioning, but a question you often ask people is if they were high functioning or low functioning. So I'd be curious to start there and just, what point did you get to? Like, what was life like before? And when did you know you just had to turn this ship around?
Yeah. Well, and I always ask people that question on Recovery Happy Hour because I am trying so hard to just explode this idea that being an alcoholic or having a substance use disorder or just questioning your drinking means that you are drinking, alone every day, that you don't have a home, that you are in jail. Like we have all these stereotypes in our head and we think, well, if I'm not that, then I couldn't possibly have a problem, right?
Yeah.
And, it's probably the opposite. I feel like most people don't have a normal relationship with alcohol. I mean, it's a substance that's designed to mess you up and get you physically addicted. So I just try so hard to share the news that it's okay if it looks like you have your life together. You can still have a problem with alcohol, and that's okay too. Like it's okay to just say, I can't do it all anymore. And that's where I was at. It was 2016. And at the time, life looked like, I owned a business. I had a business partner. I had a full-time staff. I had been building this business for a number of years and had worked really hard to get where I was getting to. And we were about to expand and build into a new space. And at the same time as I was going through all these really exciting growing pains, my drinking was just out of control. But I had been so good at doing both at the same time. I grew up a perfectionist, the sibling of a drug and alcohol addict, and was just my whole life was about making it look like everything was fine, that I had no problems. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And as an adult, I mean, I just carried that with me everywhere. And if I was drinking every day and waking up still drunk from the night before or hungover, I wasn't, I worked really, really hard to make sure that nobody knew, that it looked like everything was fine. And in November of 2016, I had just had enough. I mean, drinking was physically taking its toll on my body. And, I'm smart enough to know that at a certain point, you can't negotiate with alcohol. It's going to win, and you can either let it win and you can die, or you can make some really crazy decisions that, might turn your life into something you'd never expect in a really bad way. Or you can say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm just going to learn how to not drink this thing and see how to live my life without it. And I wish that at the time, because I had wrestled for so long with this idea of am I or am I not? Is my problem bad enough? I don't look like an alcoholic. I mean, it was just the idea of am I or am I not? I was
Mm-hmm.
more obsessed with that than I was with just looking at my life and saying, I'm not happy. Why am I doing this to myself every day? And I think that, women especially, we have a lot of pressure to do all the things, have, get married, have kids, have a family, go to work or be a stay at home mom. Like we just assume that we have to take on all these roles and be okay with that. And if it feels like too much, I mean, I know that my instinct, again, like I said, is to be like, oh, don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But I'm going to look for something to help ease the pain or ease the
Yeah.
stress. And that was alcohol. After a while, it becomes your reward. So at the end of the day, it's like, well, I worked, 12 hours today, really, really killed it. I deserve that bottle of wine. And eventually it was like turning into 2 bottles of wine or, a bottle of wine and 3 martinis. And it was, I'd wake up every day just sick, just hungover or still drunk. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm fine by 10 a.m. It's like, oh, this thing is, like I feel ill until 5 o'clock p.m. And I don't know. I've been around. I come from a family with addiction, so I knew. How do I say this? I knew I was probably going to have to quit someday because I know enough about alcoholism to know that, like, there is a genetic predisposition to it. I have it, and I was probably going to have to quit someday. But I didn't want to quit until I was really, really ready because I knew that if I was trying to quit, and had admitted that this thing was hard and I was still going to, keep drinking, like I was going to ruin all the fun. So I
Yeah.
just I just wanted I just wanted to like squeeze out all the fun I possibly could, until I decided to quit, cuz when I do things, I do them. I go hard. I really do things, and I was like I'm going to do it the real way. And so there wasn't any half-assing it. But the thing that really helped me switch gears and understand that I have a problem and it's not my fault is I started listening to a recovery podcast, and I heard a woman share her story, and she sounded just like me.
Yeah.
She didn't have any major life, altering consequences from her drinking, but she was miserable. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. I can't believe I went all these years thinking I was the only one. And it turns out there's so many of us. So I listened to her story and I did what she did. She went to an AA meeting. So I went to an AA meeting, and I just considered it getting data.
Yeah.
And from that point on, everything really started to shift for me. But it started to shift because I knew I wasn't alone. And that, like, you have to have that. You can't do this alone, and you have to know you aren't alone.
I totally agree because, and you were just saying earlier, it's just reminding me of, I mean, it's just so normal in our culture, and it's just even now sometimes, I mean, not that I've been to a party in the last year, but, I'm the only one, not getting completely smashed, wrecking my body, and I'm the odd one out, it's just, we see this as normal. And if we haven't heard these stories of, people feeling the same way, needing to quit, how did they quit? Yeah, we need that community around us, and it's so healing. And we see that it's possible.
It is. And also we have to stop asking the wrong questions. The question isn't, am I an alcoholic? The question is, do I want to change?
Yeah.
Do I want to change my life? Do I want to be happier? Do I want to learn how to let go of this liquid in my glass and make a different decision and ultimately live a better life? That's the question we need to ask. We do it with giving up gluten and dairy and, meat all the time, and nobody bats an eye. But the second it becomes alcohol, then it's like, oh, no, I could never,
Yeah.
And it's just, we've got to just change our perspective on that.
That's such a good point. It's such a good point.
Yeah. I wish there was a social way to like eat gluten and not eat gluten,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what happened? You went to the first AA meeting, and like, were the first few days, the pink cloud they describe, or was it tough? Like, what was that initial part like for you?
Well, I think I sort of skipped over my story here. Let me kind of build up to what got me into that meeting.
All right.
Like I said, I grew up, just overachiever, really. Perfectionist, overachiever, good grades, always worked 2 jobs. And I drank when I was 16 because a boy dumped me. And I drank because I didn't want to feel my feelings. It wasn't like I wanted to try a wine cooler at a party. Like, I drank 3 shots of whiskey in a row. And I knew that, like, for me, it was really a feeling of control. I wanted to control the way that I felt. And that's kind of how I always drank. As an adult, I was able to kind of play it off in a certain way. I worked in the restaurant industry. I didn't go to college. I went to culinary school, had, a lot of success at a young age, traveled all over the country. And in that industry, you work just insane hours, but you also party just as hard as you work. And I did that for a long time. And, you can't, we're on audio right now, so you can't see me. I'm 5'3". I'm a pretty small lady. And, I could keep up with those guys who were drinking shots of whiskey every night, and it was a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And then you get up, and you go to work the next day, and that's what you do, rinse, repeat for 15 years. And when I was in my, I do know that probably by the age of 23, I knew my drinking wasn't normal, quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
When I woke up the next morning, I often would not remember what had happened the night before, but I wasn't like laughing it off like my friends were. Like, something about it felt really shameful, and it wasn't ever really funny to me. It was scary. And one of the reasons why it was scary is because I loved controlling my image. And when I woke up and was like, wait, I did what? That's a total lack of control for me. So that's probably a big part of that shame too.
Yeah.
But I was able to pull it off the way that I drank because, well, in my mind, because I drank expensive wine, expensive vodka. We'd go out to nice restaurants. I prided myself in like never drinking vodka out of a plastic bottle. I mean, I was just so stupid. But you make up all these.
I hear all of it. Yes.
Yeah, you make up all these rules. And then, and I would try to quit for a month, and then, 3 weeks, and then 2 weeks. And, and I couldn't ever really stick to it for very long. It was really hard to stay stopped. And the mental real estate that was spent just thinking about alcohol, that's what's crazy, because you can't quantify that. You can say, oh, well, I only have 2 or 3 drinks a day. Okay, that's great. But how often are you thinking about drinking? How often are you thinking about alcohol? Like, how often are you planning your drinking or planning how you're going to recover from it? That's where the critical information is. So I just started to sort of observe the way that my mind was responding to alcohol and planning my life around it. And in my mid 30s, I got a divorce, and it was a surprise to me. My marriage just crumbled. I found out my ex-husband had been having affairs with other women, and it was a really, I say that because I mean, like my life changed drastically in one day.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I had always been able to count on alcohol before, and I was going to lean hard on it this time to get me through this. And that last year of my drinking was that, well, year and a half is that post-divorce era.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when it got scary. And
Yeah.
it wasn't like I had somebody to help me to bed at night. It was like, no, I was living alone and I was falling down and I was waking up with bruises and I didn't know where they came from. And, I was just, every time I drank, I wasn't excited to drink. I was nervous to drink because I never knew what happened once I started.
Yeah.
The night could end in a much different way than I intended. And that was happening all the time. And it was giving me so much anxiety. And there was a weekend when I just binge drank for like 3 days. And it looked appropriate. I was going to parties and with a bunch of people who were also heavy drinkers. And so in comparison, my drinking didn't look that bad. But after 3 days, I woke up on Monday. I couldn't shake that hangover. And
Yeah.
I was a champ. I mean, I would do yard work. Like I was so good at making it look like I was fine. And that hangover lasted for 3 days. And it turns out that wasn't a hangover. Like that was physical withdrawal.
Yeah.
The amount that I had been drinking up to that point on a daily basis. First of all, and your listeners should know this, it's very, very dangerous to quit drinking cold turkey if you're a daily drinker like I was. So I don't advise doing what I did. I was at home for 3 days alone. I should have called my doctor. So I hope everyone who's listening understands that that's very risky and please call your doctor.
It's a good point because a lot of people don't know that.
It can kill you.
Yeah.
Withdrawal from alcohol will kill you. So, I felt like I had the flu for about 3 days. And that, 2 days into it, I started to realize what was happening. And I was like, oh my God, we're here. Like this is happening right now, Tricia. You're detoxing and this is how bad it's gotten. You're just too drunk all the time to realize it. And after I started feeling better, about 3 or 4 days later, I was like, oh, maybe I'll listen to a podcast and quit for a couple of weeks or something. I was still in that state of mind. And then that's when I heard that story. So my first stop was to an AA meeting. And it was such a relief to sit down with a bunch of strangers and hear them talk and know that we all shared the same feelings about alcohol. We all shared the same stress, shame, guilt, remorse, anger, confusion, and we're all total strangers. Like I said, it's the great equalizer. So there was a lot of relief in that first meeting. And I feel like that's when I was able to just let go of some of my anxiety about this, that this was all mine to handle alone, that this was just my burden to carry in this world. It's not like that at all. There's lots of us out here. And the rubber really hit the road. I started to connect with people. I got a sponsor at that meeting. I worked the steps, but I also started looking for other tools. I was using a Facebook accountability group so I could talk to people online whenever I wanted. I was going to yoga. I was, seeing a therapist. I was, reading books. I did everything. If someone told me it was going to help, I would try it.
Me too. I was just like, yeah, bring it on.
Yeah. And also that's just me. Like I'm just a learner. I'm curious.
Same.
Yeah. So I was trying all the things and if they didn't work, I'm like, next, and I'd try something else. And I didn't do all the things every day. You kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like. And I just started to build this recovery plan that was all my own and it was working for me and it still does. That was 4.5 years ago. And
it's amazing.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that, for the record, I don't go to AA anymore. I haven't been in about 3 years, but I'd recommend that everybody try a meeting at least once, just to walk into a room and know that you're not alone. That's the best feeling.
It's incredible. I was listening to one of your episodes recently, and I have a similar experience. I also don't go there now, although I did in my early days. And yeah, in the city that I live in Toronto, like there's, in non-COVID times,
right,
like so many meetings, like at any given time, you're like, wow, it's this whole like underground network that I didn't even know about, like that you can just get free help.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
It is. It is. There are some really cool, miraculous moments to getting sober. There's also some really scary moments, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but that first time you realize, oh, it's not just me. It's magic.
It is. And I don't think we're going to dwell on this today, but I know it's a topic that comes up for me a lot and it comes up for you a lot. But just that there are so many paths to recovery. And to your point of people, checking it out, AA, as a resource, figuring out if it's right for them. And if not, finding something else because there are so many things available right now.
Oh my God. And even since I've gotten sober, like, I mean, I feel like there are 100 times more resources available now that have been developed even before COVID hit, when everybody had to pivot and start moving things online. There are so many ways to get sober. It's not just AA anymore. It's like, I mean, it's a buffet out there. What's your favorite flavor? Great. There's a recovery for that. Like it's really cool. There's so many options.
It's amazing. So, what does your recovery look like today?
Today, my recovery looks like, let's see. Well, my morning routine, I started that early and it's always been very impactful to me. Although what I do during my morning routine sometimes changes. But having that first hour of the day where I can get up and really just focus on what puts my mind in a great place. So, I have an online Bible study that I do. I journal. Journaling is just a huge part of my life. It's so helpful. Having that quiet time in the morning, it makes me ready for the day, slows my mind down a little bit so I'm not rushing to make decisions. I'm just a better person if I can take that time to get my head right. And, early in sobriety, that was reading the big book and working on the steps with my sponsor. Sometimes now it's like I'll do a yoga video or I'll do some breath work or, like I said, the journaling and the Bible study. I've got an app on my phone that I use that I stay connected with my friends in recovery where we can video chat with each other all day. So I've got that constant community just in my hand on my phone whenever. And podcasts, that's why I started one. I think they're really, really helpful. So I'll still listen to podcasts. And, after a while, I feel like there comes an intuitiveness where if you need to mix it up. If recovery is starting to feel like a chore and it's annoying to you, then it's time to shift things in a different direction for a little while. So I'm always open to what feels right at the time. What feels right in April of 2021 is a whole lot different than April of 2020.
Yeah.
Was a whole lot different than April of 2019. I mean, you have to let yourself evolve based on how you're feeling, where you're at in life, where you're at in recovery. If there's a giant pandemic, what you're doing to stay sober on day one is not indicative of what it's going to be like for the rest of your life. Not at all.
It's so true. And I just underscore that. I agree. My morning practice is just so important to me. And sometimes it's, just laying on a yoga mat. Sometimes it's doing yoga, but just, as you say, that time just to clear and connect and get centered and enter the day. And I love your point too about changing it up because we will feel different. There are different things, going on in the world or in our lives. And it's just okay, once it starts to feel, I don't know, not drudgery, but when I think it should be joy filled, right?
Yeah, no,
that you're just
should.
I want to do this, be on my own side and feel nourished and good and inspired.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's no right or wrong way to recover. You have to know what's working for you. And there's no governing body that's going to knock on your door at night and say, "Hey, you're doing this wrong." That doesn't exist. You have the freedom to do whatever it takes to make your life as wonderful as you want it to be. And if that means you get up at 3 a.m. and you weave baskets, great, do it. If that means you're going to 8 meetings at, your local AA club a day, do it. Whatever works for you, works. And a lot of people will have opinions on what you should do and what you
A
shouldn't
lot
do
of people.
and how, especially God.
Can we just underscore that so everybody really gets the point?
Really, everyone's going to have an opinion. And also I think a lot of that roots, stems from fear. If something's working for them, then of course it's got to work for you too. Because if it doesn't work for you, then, oh God, what does that say about them? It's we could talk about that all day.
Yeah.
But do what's right for you. Do what feels good and do what works. And that's all that matters.
I totally agree. And so I want to ask you another question that I know you like to ask, and it's just such a good question. So I'm like, let's turn the table on the podcaster.
Oh, fun. I never get to be on this side of it.
I know. It's a lot of fun to just ask you all these questions. So what has surprised you about recovery?
I think what has surprised me is, well, one is that life isn't boring. I thought it was going to be really boring once I stopped drinking. And it turns out life was really boring while I was drinking, because all I was doing was I was just in a pattern of drunk, hungover. And that sucks. That's just really boring. It's like after a certain time of day, I didn't want to pick up the phone because I knew that I would be slurring. I couldn't drive anywhere. I was kind of held hostage by alcohol. And now I've got the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. If I want to drive somewhere at night, I can do that. At first it felt kind of naughty to be out at night, like going to the grocery store. And now it's like, yeah, that's just life. I can do what I want.
And there are other people at the grocery store. Like they're not all at home getting wasted. Like that's where I'm like, oh, it's interesting. All these people just have like normal lives. They do normal things.
I know. Where did all these people come from? I thought they were all sitting on their couch drinking a bunch of Netflix. Yeah. And I mean, going to parties is fun too. I mean, when we could, I thought that I needed alcohol to be the life of the party, or to kind of, lubricate the social environment, or to be funnier, or to feel sexier. And I don't, I'm a ham. I love to talk to people, and I can do that without alcohol. Like I'm capable. Yeah. I'm very capable of doing that. I went to my 20-year high school reunion, I guess about a year and a half ago. I mean, I was the last person up. I was, me and the other sober guy, like we were
I love it.
We were the ringleaders. We were like, taking coordinating the after party and getting everybody over there and on the dance floor. Like we were really present and having the best time. And that's a really cool part about being sober, is just being in the moment and not trying to change it into something that it's not. Like when you used to drink things fun, like if you were bored, you'd get drunk because you're like, oh, surely this will make it more fun. That's just us wanting to turn an experience into something that it's not. And now if I'm not having fun, it's because the place that I'm at isn't fun, and I can just choose to go home. I know.
And like dancing, like you really want to dance, like just listening to the music and just having fun.
Yes. I stay on my shoes and in my shoes, I don't fall off.
Yeah, me
too. Everyone could hear what I'm saying because I'm not slurring. I look great in photos, unless I just take a bad photo. It's not like my eyes are pointing in two different directions, because it's fun and it's free now. And because I'm not held hostage to this thing anymore. It's great.
That's amazing. So let's talk about recovery happy hour, because I feel like it's a movement. I just think it's so awesome. So what inspired you, to take things like to that platform and have all of these conversations?
Sure. Well, when I started listening to podcasts, I noticed that they all told the drunk story.
Mm.
But there wasn't a whole lot of information about what happened after. It was a lot of what happened in the past. And I'm like, well, that serves, first of all, that serves a purpose. Like we all need to hear those stories to not feel alone. But I wanted to know what happened next. Like, okay, well, now that you've quit, tell me about your life. Like what's different, what's changing. And I couldn't find that podcast anywhere. It didn't exist. So I decided to start one. And the premise was I wanted to interview people, much like I had heard other podcasts interview guests, but I wanted them to be sober for at least a year so that we had a lot of recovery to talk about. I was just
Hmm.
done with talking about the drunk part. Like, let's talk about how you did it. What were the benefits? How did your life change? What are you doing now? What are you looking forward to? Just having that conversation like you would have with a friend at happy hour, less of like the sad story and more about what we're excited about. At the time, I also couldn't find a ton of recovery podcasts, certainly not a whole lot that were hosted by women. So, yeah, I started one, and that was sort of the premise. And that was almost 3 years ago. And it's done really well for itself.
It's amazing. So how did you find the people, for the early episodes?
Well, at the time, I was part of a Facebook accountability community from the Recovery Elevator podcast. And so there was this Facebook group that I was in, and I found friends in recovery from that group and asked them if they wanted to be on the show. And most people were really happy to do it. Or I asked people that I knew in real life that were in recovery if they wanted to come on, and they did. And then, at a certain point when the podcast got more listeners and became more popular and people figured out how to get a hold of me, they would start asking to come onto the show. And that's really been the case. I don't know really when I don't know when I stopped looking for people to be on the show.
That's okay.
Yeah. But that I did get to that place where that like the tables sort of turned, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it was kind of a mixed bag between people that I'd met online in recovery communities and then people in real life, through AA meetings and whatnot, day-to-day recovery community stuff.
That's awesome. And so, my next question for you is I find, since I have created this podcast, I receive a lot of positive feedback from it. But the part that also really touches me is that I always feel like I'm learning,
Mhm.
like every time I finish an interview with somebody, I'll think about it for a long time. And I think, wow, like I was really meant to hear that, So I'm learning along with the people listening. And I'm curious to know, well, I guess, first of all, if you have the same experience and, what you've learned through how you've done like well over 100 episodes.
Yeah, I think I'm somewhere around 120 something. I don't
Okay.
know the number. But yes, I have that. I do learn a lot from my guests. First, I mean, people are from all over the place. So just hearing somebody who's had a totally different life experience and upbringing is fascinating in general.
Hmm.
Then you add the recovery stuff too. Yes, I learn all the time. And then there are sometimes when I have people on the show that have really long-term sobriety and I hear about the growth that happened in year 8 or year 15, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm really just getting started. Like
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to all that cool stuff that I'm going to learn about myself as I continue this process, because that was a really important place for me to get to when I quit drinking, was when I figured out that it's not about the alcohol, that it's about what I was drinking over. And then
Hmm.
and then when I figured out, oh, wait, now I'm just living my life, like not drinking is my new normal. So it's not about waking up every day and going, how am I not going to drink today? It's about waking up every day and accepting life as it's presented to me and making the best choices I can and just doing the best I can just in general, to be kinder, to listen more, to do my best, to have boundaries, these are things that don't have anything to do with alcohol. They're just tools that you learn through this process. And, it's self improvement. I'm sure you could read a bunch of books and, do the same thing. But it's so cool when you realize, like, oh, wow. Yeah, now I'm just kind of living this normal life that doesn't have alcohol in it. And I just don't ever really think about that other part. You just start digging into what makes you feel good and what you want to do and what makes you happy, and be open to being flexible with that. We can't get too attached to an idea and just assume that it's always going to be this one way, because it's not.
Yeah. I know, as you're saying this, I know I think about it all the time. And one of the things that was pivotal to me in the early part of my recovery is I was like, wow. And you described it earlier, like the mental gymnastics and the time spent consuming alcohol and dreading it and the shame. It's like, wow, I've put so much time into my own self destruction and just like tossing it away. like, what if I use this energy, just to like live a life that I really liked, and
Mm-hmm.
now we have all of this, found time. And like you said, some days it's like profound and other days it's just doing normal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you just can use your energy for completely different things. And it's so cool.
It is. And the tools that I've learned in this process have taught me how to do so many other things in my life. Like they apply to all areas of your life.
Yeah.
I used to be just obsessed with what people thought about me. I was such a people pleaser. And
Same.
knowing, like, learning about myself and being introduced really to myself and learning about how I make decisions. Like, I learned all of that because of quitting drinking. I learned all of that from those recovery tools. But now that I have those tools and I apply them to other things, like, I'm not an entrepreneur anymore. I hung up that hat about a year and a half ago, and I work for a restaurant group, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. I just moved in with my boyfriend. Never thought I'd ever do that again, ever. Like,
Amazing.
I am a better employee. I think slower. I would like to think that I'm nicer to people now, but not because I care about what they think about me. It's because I genuinely want to connect with them, like eye to eye, like I'm actually present with people now. These are all things that change over time. And I get a ton of emails and DMs on social media and people just being like, "Well, when does it get normal? When do I get there? When do I get there?" And I can't tell you when you get there, but you'll know when you're there, when it's all in your rearview mirror. And you'll just stop and go, "Wow, like things are different now." And
Hmm.
it's just that's the part I hope that everybody arrives at, is when you realize that it's easier to not drink than it is to keep drinking if you have a problem. It really is easier to not drink.
Yeah. And I hear what you're describing too is, taking the alcohol out and also getting, you described going to therapy, like getting to the root, of what the problem was and being open to really taking a look at yourself and learn and transform. Because if you just remove it and are miserable, you're not going to be looking in that rearview mirror.
Mhm. Right, exactly.
So I'm also curious, in all of these stories that you've heard while you've been recording the podcast, are there some like universal truths that come out, like some threads that are just like, it doesn't matter, man, woman, background, age, that just like these common threads of
Mhm.
recovery that you're like, oh, there it is again. I love
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, at the end of every episode I ask, any final words, anything you want to share with the listeners. And everybody always says the same thing, and that's that you're not alone. Everybody says the same thing. You're not alone in this, and getting past that one thought is what will change everything. When you realize you're not alone. Because when we're alone, that usually means like when we feel like we're alone, that usually means we're in a pretty dark place.
Yeah.
And, it's like, it's just, I understand how that sucks you in, but taking a tiny step out of that darkness to just reach out and just make an attempt to tell somebody will give you so much relief. Just letting a little bit of that shame out. And it's like a pipe that's full of steam, that is just bursting, and you get a little crack in the pipe and finally some of that steam can escape. That's what it feels like to tell somebody and to know that you're not alone. And most people around us have experience with drinking. So if you have a neighbor that you're close with and you tell them, "Hey, I'm just kind of noticing I'm not okay with the way I drink anymore." Your neighbor might not be able to relate to that personally, but I guarantee you they have a brother or an uncle or a daughter, who's been through that, and they know where to point you if you're looking for resources.
It's so true.
Mhm.
And people want to help.
They
Like, I
do.
just thought they would be, that I would be very judged
Oh,
and
yeah.
so many
Oh,
things.
yeah.
And I mean, maybe people did behind my back that I'm unaware of, but most people were just so supportive and helpful. And to your point, we know somebody and you can go here and you can do this. And I was just like, I was like, yeah, you can't see my face right now, but like, just like surprised.
Mhm. When I first started telling people that I was quitting drinking, I thought that people were gonna be like, "Oh, well, you're on your own." Like that they weren't gonna be interested in helping, that maybe they might feel sorry for me, that they were definitely gonna be disappointed in me. And people aren't like that. Like I believe that we are innately kind people to each other, and that we generally like, I feel like we all really want to help each other. That's our first instinct, especially when you're being vulnerable with somebody. I mean, if you're being vulnerable with somebody, you have to have some sort of foundation of trust there, a little, even if it's just a sliver of it. And you'd be surprised at how many people are going to be supportive of you, especially if you're asking for help. When I quit drinking, I didn't tell the whole world right off the bat. I didn't blast it on Facebook. I started telling people close to me kind of one at a time. And I was afraid that, you know, I think the biggest surprise was how people, how do I word this? Some people had no idea. And because it looked like I had my stuff together. And sometimes they kind of back away, like they're a little afraid of you because that makes them question their own drinking. Because if in their eyes you look like you were fine and they know they're drinking as much as you, then what does that say about them?
Yeah.
And me personally, I'm so, like I said, I was so obsessed with what people thought about me, which meant I thought that people were thinking about me all the time, and people
Yeah.
weren't. They're thinking about anyone but themselves.
They're
And
worried where their next drink is coming from.
exactly. So if you tell somebody and they're asking you a lot of questions, it's because they're worried about their own drinking. They don't care about you. you know,
So true.
that's like the best like recovery hack I can share with people, which is, hey, when this happens, because it will, that's about them. That's not about you.
You're so right. You are
Hmm.
so right.
It's kind of funny now that it's just, I don't know. I just kind of laugh at like 2016 Trisha, like, oh, you'll figure it out soon.
You make a really good point, though, for people listening. It's something that is really personal, and at first, I know I was very fragile and it took me a long time to share it. And ultimately, in my life, I feel like it's more freeing for me to share it than not to share it. But it's really a personal decision, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yes. And if you don't tell anybody for whatever reason, if that's something that's benefiting you, like I said, maybe you're a high licensed individual and you just can't tell people,
Yeah.
then that's your prerogative. You don't have to go out and tell the world, I'm in recovery now. Let's all celebrate. To be honest, a lot of people just don't care. Like
Yeah.
that's the other like recovery hack is that a lot of people just don't care.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't drink like us. So, yeah, I forgot your original question, but yes, I agree.
No, I just wanted to make the point because sometimes I think people think I don't everybody's like now I don't know, I have to word this carefully too, but like, we can be sharing a lot of our personal lives in many different spaces and
Mhm.
you just don't have to.
You
It
don't.
doesn't
Mm-mm.
discredit your recovery. It's like it's a very personal, like between you and God or whatever your thing is, like it's a
Mhm.
very personal
It's
commitment.
true. And yeah, and there should be no pressure to do this, kind of harkening back to what I said earlier, like there should be no pressure for anybody to do this in a way that isn't right for you. And if that means
Mhm.
you keep it private, then you're allowed to do that. Especially on social media. And you see this a lot in the recovery community. Everybody just shares everything. I actually have never shared my story on my own podcast. And I try not to share much of my personal life really at all. I mean, I think the fact that I just told you that I moved in with my boyfriend, I don't think I've said that publicly to any of my listeners or followers, because I like to keep my private life private, because once
Yeah.
it's out there forever.
Yep.
So yeah, you can make your own rules, you can define your own boundaries and you can change those. And there's no, you don't have to jump out there and claim recovery as your identity.
Totally agree. And just like owning your story and how you want to share it or what parts you want to share of it. Yeah, you make all the calls.
Hmm.
So, if somebody is listening to this podcast and they're struggling right now, maybe they're questioning their alcohol use, what would you say to them?
Well, you're not alone.
I know we've covered so much of it, so it's a
You're not
little bit
alone. You're
repetitive,
not
but I
alone.
just like, if we're speaking right to that person,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
love your,
Yeah, I want to tell that person that I love them so much, and that I know that there are moments when they hate themselves because they think they got themselves into this mess and they didn't. We're all drinking over something. And if it's unresolved trauma from your past, or because you were never taught how to cope with life in a healthy way, like I said, this drug, this legal drug that is embedded in our culture, is designed, it's not designed, it exists naturally. It is meant, like, it will suck you in. It is physically addictive, and it's emotionally, and it's certainly mentally addictive. That's not your fault. That's just, that's what's happening to you right now. And there are resources available for you. And if you want to choose to be less miserable, maybe look into some of those resources. I mean, like, let's take the shame out of it. Like, if you need to go away for treatment, then just go, get it taken care of. Like that, it doesn't have to be full of like guilt and shame and remorse and sadness and depression. Like, let's remove that and get to work. Do you want to be happier? Yes. Do you want to do it this way or that way? I want to do it this way. Great. Go for it. Like, we don't need to hate ourselves anymore. Like, it's just that darkness, all those ugly, icky shame feelings, they just they slow down this process. And once you get over the shame part and decide that you want to do this because you want to love yourself and you want to choose a more positive life, a more joyful life, a healthier one for sure, then find a way to do that. And that's a great thing. That doesn't mean that you've failed. There's no failure in this.
no. And I mean, maybe for you and I, it's been like the greatest teacher possible, like
Yeah.
my life would look nowhere close to what it looks like today had I not been through that.
Right. Well, and actually, I kind of want to go back to something you said before you asked that
Yeah.
question, is that, you know, it's okay. Like, in my experience, when I drank, I didn't really know myself very well. I had this idea of who I thought I was, or who I thought I was trying to be, but I didn't really know myself. I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't have a lot of confidence in who I really was on the inside. And so I understand if it's hard for people to kind of make these decisions at first, one, to get sober, and then to have the ability to say that you want to do it this way when this other person is telling you to do it that way. Like, it's okay if that's difficult, but every day that you don't drink, that you put a little bit of work into the recovery part of this, you start to meet yourself and you start to learn who you are, and you start to build the skills to have confidence, to create boundaries, to choose different people to hang out with. Maybe you start new relationships, maybe you end ones, maybe you're like me and you make a total career change and you close your business. You don't learn all those things instantly, but you learn them slowly over time. And then you build that confidence. And then you get to, the ability to make those decisions. Like, like, almost 5 years down the road, sometimes I have to catch myself and go, Trisha, no, no, no. Like, think back to November of 2016. Like, it's not as easy, it's just saying, oh, well, just don't listen to that person. It's hard at first, but if you work at it, you're going to meet yourself and you're going to learn who that person is and you're going to build those skills. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. And in the meantime, I love that person so much. And I know how much they hate themselves right now because that was me. So for whoever's listening, just if you need to borrow my love for you today, if you can't love yourself, that's fine. I've got plenty, but you can absolutely do this. And you're so, so, so much more capable than you think you are.
I agree. I'm tossing all my love in there too. And I'm just so glad that you said that, because I remember also right before I got sober, I was like, yeah, like horrible anxiety, as you said, like numbing out on my feelings. I'm like, who am I going to be without this coping mechanism? Like I just felt like I was just going to be a giant panic attack who didn't like herself,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just feels hard but to your point, like I didn't know who I was. And then when I softened into being kind to her and just being like, I'm just going to try and love you and figure out who you are and take care of you and be on your side, everything just softens. And I just didn't think I could actually live without it. And it
Mm-hmm.
sounds crazy now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can.
Mm-hmm. It's so,
And you and
yeah.
I are proof of that.
It's 100%, 100%. And I feel like I had something really poignant I was about to say, and it just like went right out my ear. Like it just went in one ear and out the. I don't remember. It's been a long
everything you've said has been incredible.
Yeah, they can. That person. Oh, I remember. You said it was like who, who am I going to be? You can ask yourself that question, but change your tone. It's not who am I going to be? It's, oh my gosh, who am I going to be?
Yeah.
Change,
Yeah.
like, what are you really asking? Because the possibilities are endless. And if it's that one thing that's holding you back, wow, that sounds pretty achievable. One thing holding you back from your best life, great. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh my God. This is just, I could talk to you for like 100 hours. So, and then keep going. So I'm going to wrap it up. But I want to encourage everybody to listen to Recovery Happy Hour. The stories are incredible, and listen, give Tricia good reviews, 5 stars on Apple, all of that good stuff. And also she has on your website, there's a lot of amazing resources too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and yeah, anything you want to add in here about where people can find you, what you want to point them to, anything you want to add, go for it.
Sure. Well, the new season is on May 4th, season 7. Recovery Happy Hour is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you don't know how to listen to a podcast, then you can go to my website and listen there, recoveryhappyhour.com. There are lots of resources on there, and the resources really reflect the show in that I share all different kinds of stories, all different modalities of recovery. So if somebody is listening and they only want to do things the 12-step way, that's great. But this podcast is going to share other ways too. So it's very like across the board, like, bring it on. I've got every item on the recovery menu on the show. So it's great for people that have been in recovery for a long time to learn about new resources. And yeah, those are all available on the website. And I didn't even I didn't plan it this way, but it's season 7 starts on Tuesday, May 4th. I turned 40 on May 5th. So
happy birthday.
It'll be my last, recovery happy hour episode. And, before that big milestone birthday. So I just realized that I was like, that sounds like it should be important or something. Anyway.
Sounds like yeah. No pressure.
I know. But yeah, new episodes come out every Tuesday.
Awesome. Do you have anything else that you want to add, or did we cover everything?
I think we covered everything. I used to do, events, and starting to do the show and to build this sort of public recovery persona. I did like a sober music festival at South by Southwest, and I did a really cool retreat in early 2020. So, but I'm not doing those right now for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a gaping hole there, but those things will come back as the world comes back to.
Well, we'll just keep updating the show notes. That would be, I know we're all looking forward to events again. That would be so awesome.
And then, on social media at Recovery Happy Hour. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Tricia, I loved every second of this, and I love you, and I love your work and your recovery, and that it's your birthday. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.